Hey everyone, I'm Noctis Corvus, but you can call me Noctis. This week is something a little bit different here, in the fact that I sort of did this video as a semi-introduction sort of thing. Mainly the drawing itself is of the character I made for this channel, and as for the script, I intend to sort of use it to talk a little bit more about myself and what I'm doing here, since I realised I haven't been doing that. Not as much as I want to anyway. Most of the videos end up explaining the drawing in a sort of essay almost. So I'm giving myself a video dedicated to introducing myself, to kind of talk about who I am, what I like, and really what I'm doing here. So, hello again. I go by Noctis Corvus here, commonly shortening it myself to Noctis for simplicity. And since I originally wasn't 100% sure or confident in tying my name into this sort of stuff, to sort of help me keep myself separate from this and every day. But I can now say that outside of this, I am Tyler. Other details of myself won't really be shared too much here, like last name and anything I'd rather not say. But for now, I can give a name. Though I will likely continue to use and go by Noctis for videos and other stuff, mainly since it does still help me keep things separate. Anyway, with the reintroduction out of the way, I will take this chance to sort of waffle about myself here for a while and eventually move to talk more about the drawing if there's time. Now this is likely to be a very short section, to be fair. It's more to give a few details about myself that really haven't been able to fit in any other sections I've made, but they're still worth saying because I want to say them. And I'm not really someone who will share too many personal details, mainly for my own sake and such. But there is a lot that I am fairly open with. So first of this is that I do identify as part of the LGBTQ+ community, in a sense that I'm asexual and a lesbian. It isn't exactly something I hide, I am fairly open with this, but it doesn't come up too often in videos or conversation, so it is something worth noting here. Maybe eventually they'll tie into pieces and things that I'm doing, but at the moment they simply haven't. And unrelated to all of this, I am also diagnosed autistic. Again, it isn't something that will be brought up too often here, but whilst I'm talking about myself, it is a part that I want to mention, because it is a part of me. Now, as for my art, I do actually do a range of types. Here I only really show my digital stuff, and this side of it, but I still paint with watercolours and acrylics depending on my mood. I started off on paper, so it is fun to revisit it often, as there are some ideas that simply fit that medium better, rather than doing it digitally if it doesn't work. I also recently introduced myself to gouache paints, so I am getting gradually familiar with that. And outside of painting, I still enjoy other materials like markers, pencils and charcoal. The last of the list is always fun, since I forget how messy it can be until it's too late. Maybe in the future I will want to show some of my other types of work here on the channel, but for now I don't really know how I would record it, since it took me a while to work out this one here. But it is a goal though that I have in mind, and it is something I will likely explore more when I have an idea that would need it. But that does wrap up the basics section here, so without further ado, let's move on to the fun stuff. The stuff that is the real reason I'm making this video, more as an excuse just to waffle about things I like. And this is really the fun part for me to talk about, naturally so. It's also where I will make sure that I don't go off on too many tangents and make this script way longer than it needs to be. But before any further ado, let's just get into it. I've stalled long enough. For people who know me, they'll know what I will mention first, and the order these are to be said in. All of that is to say that I can be quite predictable in areas like these, and there are certain things I will talk about for hours if people let me, and sometimes even if they don't. My first main interest that I'm mentioning here is mythology. This one began when I was rather young too, as far as I can remember really, but it is something I've always kept a hold of through the years. My introduction to it were Greek and Roman myths, and that again is if memory serves me well from childhood, with it then expanding into other main mythologies people think of, like Norse myths here and there as well. Though those ones came a bit later. And yes, this interest rather early expanded into legends as well. As soon as I'd really worked out the differences of myth and legends, that is. It's a very fine line between them, so it took me a while to work that one out. But that discovery led me into Arthurian legend and the stories of King Arthur, the Round Table, and everything kind of associated with that. And yes, prior to all of this, I had already been exposed to folk tales like Robin Hood as well. So really that entire sphere is something that interests me, and it's something that I'm always willing to learn more about the areas that I've not heard of yet. Since it's also something that I'll never know everything of, which is again part of the appeal. Though at the current moment, my love of myths has then introduced me to other interests as well. And I only say it like that since I'm probably downplaying them slightly, but they are things that I will definitely take this chance to mention and discuss in any way I can, since I will very rarely turn down a chance to talk about them. So the main two interests I'm on about here are Epic the Musical and Hadestown. See, when I'm working, I have music on in the background more often than not. And in high school, I discovered musicals via a friend. I've always sort of casually listened to a few of them, since I could never go and see them, but the two previously mentioned are by far my favourites. And they were ones that I found a lot later than other musicals, only because they were harder for me to find. But these two are the ones that are currently always on loop in recent years, whilst I'm working, or they're the ones that I'm ready to talk about without prompting or preparation. But let's start this off chronologically with Hadestown, since it was the first one I found and it was the one that was made first. Hadestown is a musical retelling that is adapting the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. And it is an actual musical you can go see on stage. I haven't seen it yet, but I do have tickets for a few months to finally check it off the list, as I have wanted to see it for years now. But the musical is one that itself I will listen to on loop, as I have a subtle bias towards the myth it features. Orpheus and Eurydice was one of the first ones I heard about, though I can't really recall how, and the musicals itself is quite interesting with the background of Persephone and Hades. I won't spoil it for the people who don't know it, but I will say that for a while I couldn't listen to the ending of the album, since the first song doesn't lie. It is a tale of tragedy. For me though, I love the story and the music, which is why it's being mentioned here. Moving on though, before this turns into a video essay on Hadestown, which can very easily happen if I'm not careful. For anyone unaware, Epic the Musical is an adaptation of the Odyssey being one of the epics in Greek mythology and history. It's created by Jorge Rivera Herranz, I may be saying that wrong, and he's been sharing the process a lot online whilst making it. I can't quite remember when I found it. I think it was through one of his socials, I know that much, but it was around the time that he shared the first saga, which is the Troy saga. That was a few years ago at this point, so it is fully out by now, as a concept album of music adapting the entire story. And again, I won't go into everything here. I could very likely make a separate video on this, and I have been considering it, to kind of go over everything that I think about it, and to really pick apart things like characters, motifs, and just part of the stories that I really enjoy. But it is certainly one of my more active likes at the moment, so it's definitely worth mentioning it here. Whenever a new saga came out when it was still releasing, I ended up sending my friend like 20 minutes of audio notes, kind of just going over thoughts of it and unpacking everything from it, song by song. Though out of all of the sagas, my current favourite might just be the Ithaca saga, which is the final one. But in saying that, it is quite hard to rank them since it changes on the day, and even ranking the song will change on the mood and the moment. Though, moving on, there is a third musical I have a preference towards whilst we're kind of on this topic, and it does lead into the next topic I want to mention, so it's a perfect bridge. But that musical is Six. And I have seen this one, and I will be seeing it again soon. Now, Six the Musical, for anyone unaware once more, is about the 6 wives of Henry VIII. And it looks more at the wives' perspective of things, and has them as the focal point of the show. In comparison to the other two, it is shorter, but it is equally as fun. It kind of frames itself as if they're a band trying to say who had it the worst with Henry. Each then have a chance to give their story in the form of a song, and it really is just a fun way of approaching that part of history. But I'm sure people are noticing a common thread here. Historical musicals or mythological musicals. But that only leads into the next overarching interest of mine. History. This is really not my fault either. I grew up watching horrible histories and never lost interest in the different eras and the things that you could learn about it. Though it also comes from mythology as well. For myself, there was only so long before the myths led me into the history of the places that the stories had been from, as the stories do tie into the background and the society that told them. So from that moment, my interest in history had been tied into my interest in mythology. But it also kind of stood as its own branch, as there were new avenues open to explore that moved away from the myths and looked more at the factual events of history. And it is usually ancient history, I will say that much, that draws my attention. Older points of time always seem to have more appeal and interest in researching them, compared to the newer and modern history side of stuff. Though that may be due to the myth side of things too, or learning how time came to change things. Ancient Rome has been a favourite for a while, it still sort of is, but that expanded back into ancient Greece as well, mainly through the myths. However, I can't ignore that some of my favourite eras to look at have also been part of English history as well. Stuff like the Tudors with Henry VIII and the War of the Roses that led up to it. But this then goes back to Anglo-Saxons and stuff before even that. It's been strange though, since I would love to start a series inspired by history and looking at the different eras or stories from it, but I've never actually settled on how to approach it to do this. More often than not, I tend to forget why I'm researching a topic again and just go down the rabbit holes that are interesting to me, so I never get quite far past research in those ideas. But I am still considering how I may do this. I would love to tie myths and history into more of my works, so with time I will eventually work out how I wish to do it. Until then, expect it to just be a subtle connection here or there. Now, let's move away from those points before I go off into a tangent with it. I'll save all of those for a later day. But when I'm not drawing, there are a few things I do enjoy doing, which is also what I want to touch on right now. There are some activities I do that are entirely away from art and creating. Things like roller skating at the moment. I mean, I doubt I need to list art as an interest here since it's fairly obvious and I have already touched on it. Outside of it though, I also enjoy a handful of games like Hollow Knight and Hades. No surprise with Hades though. The connection to the myths in that one basically meant I would have to check it out at some point, and I've really enjoyed it since I picked it up. But all of these don't really have much that I can say about them, as they're something I just think is fun to mention. However, for the final major interest, I do enjoy writing. I've been trying to work out how to incorporate it more into the channel, to be fair. I have a series of stories at the moment that I do for my own fun, and it is something that, as a story, is fairly simple. And the writing is more fun for me to do, rather than having to fixate on it being perfect. However, the drawings are equally as fun for me to do in that series, as they don't have to be the most detailed in the world either, and they sometimes encourage me to draw things I otherwise wouldn't. However, even outside of the channel, I enjoy writing. I have a story that I do keep quite private, that I'm redrafting and working on once more though, and I have shared a handful of videos featuring the characters from this story as a way to sort of slowly introduce them all here, and to get comfortable talking about it beyond just my friends. But it is an interest that I've had since around high school, where I realised it wasn't just something to do because a teacher is making you do it. You don't have to write because someone's telling you, you can just write for fun. And writing as a whole is something that I've been trying to think about how I could incorporate it more. Maybe by doing one-off stories, where it's a single video containing an entire story, or it's something a little bit different, but it is something that I've been looking at and considering. But that does wrap up this section of the video. since they're sort of the main interests I have and the simple ones too. To list all I like means we would be here all day, so these are the main points for now. And I don't think we will be including dislikes at the moment, since I don't want to focus on the negative side of things here, and the interests are more fun overall. So let's move on at this point and discuss something else worth including here. See, I do these videos and share the process, but what about outside of it? What do I do beyond all of this? Well, at the moment I have an Etsy store that I am currently starting up, with a range of stickers and prints available over there already. All of the prints that are available are from videos here, and I am currently expanding this store as well. There are some new products in design at the moment that I don't know when I'll be introducing them, but I do hope that it will be soon, as I'm excited to see how they turn out. I'm hoping they turn out as intended, but we will have to see with all of that as and when. But at the moment I am enjoying the collection I have. I mean, I tend to make what I like, and I have some ideas at the moment for some fun things, some silly things, and some really cool ones if they end up how I picture them at the moment. That is really the main thing that I do outside of this, in all fairness, since it's another thing that I enjoy, and it's quite rewarding in a way to see my art become physical things that I can decorate my own belongings with. It's also really cool to think that maybe I can make things other people may want. Otherwise, I am on Instagram by the same name. It's the only other social platform that I am currently active on and share my work on, since it's the one I'm most comfortable with at the moment and have the most knowledge about how it works. My posts over there tend to be quite scheduled as well, but they are commonly a way of kind of previewing the video's art, as I share it earlier in the week than the actual video itself. Now, outside of all of this and art, I am also working on my own story, as I have kind of touched on here and in previous videos. It's another redraft, you see, since I realised why I was stuck with it and unhappy with the previous version of it. But that has been keeping me busy outside as something to kind of do for myself and for more fun. But I am privately hoping that this will be the final time rewriting it all, since I do hope that I'm running out of issues I've missed in previous versions. After all, I introduced it as a redraft, but it is more like a rewrite once more, though these are just part of the process and part of what happens with it. So despite the shorter previous section, I now want to take this time to sort of discuss the channel itself, and to sort of explain here my intentions and what I've been planning for it. In short, it is a little bit all over the place at the moment, with what I want to look at and what I am considering to do. There are some ideas I have more in stone that I want to try, like new inspirations and formats for videos that could be exciting to look at. It'll be something to kind of explore beyond the normal of what I do here. And yes, most of them will be art focused. Well, all of them will include art in some way, whether it's like this or a regular video. There are a few where I want to experiment with the script and sort of explore my options there before I get comfortable in repeating the same format each week, as it will eventually grow dull for me to make over time. And that's really my focus at the moment, since I do make these for my own fun as well. I have a schedule and such to keep consistent with it, but this is something I do for my own enjoyment, and I am really glad if you find it fun as well. So for the channel, I know I've included this section, but it's really just to say that I don't know exactly what I want to do going forward, but I do know that I will be experimenting and trying new things to kind of see what works and what doesn't. As I have touched on, I may start looking at including other interests of mine into things, or seeing where I can change tiny things for the better. I mean, that is really how improvements happen at the end of the day. Small changes here and there until eventually you learn something from it all. But don't worry, because otherwise I will still be doing my normal stuff here with the speed paints and the drawings. I'm not going to entirely change my mind at this moment, as this is fun for me. So the channel will see some experiments, but nothing too far from what I already share. So this is the final section here before we wrap up, and it will still be rather short compared to what I normally would have to say here, since we only have until the end of the video. All it means is that I won't really be touching on techniques or inspirations at this moment, as I instead would rather talk about why I chose this character and drawing as the backdrop for the video. I mean, in the process of development, the drawing idea did come first, before I decided to do this script a little differently. See, this is the character that I ended up creating as my icon for the channel, with a few differences applied here and there. For one, I decided to shorten her hair, and compared to the original design, I changed a few things with the skirt, like the pages at the belt, and I made the skirt a little bit shorter. In the later stages of the video, I then also changed a few details of the halo-like element to make it glow somewhat, and better resemble stars in space. But these changes were to make the overall piece look stronger, and because I'm not really against her having multiple outfits. In their original design phase, they went through a few outfits that were all equally as strong, and the clothes are something that I love to play around with, time and time again. So it's more than likely that she will have a range of outfits across the times that I draw her, since it lets me experiment more and utilise her motifs and themes in various ways. It only means that, over time, she will have more of a selection, all things considered. However, it felt fitting to me that I would draw the character for the channel whilst talking more about myself, as it fits the video and I don't mind ignoring the art more than usual whilst talking at the moment. As I said, the idea for the drawing came first and the script second. That was mostly because I know that I will eventually reuse this character, and I am likely to discuss her themes and such at a later date as they develop further. For now, I don't mind leaving it out in favour of making this script and this video, since I have had this idea for a while now. It's just gone through multiple iterations and versions of it where the script has been scrapped and the idea moved back. So it's been nice to finally get around to it and to finally find a drawing where it works. And to find one where I'm not racing against a clock to discuss myself and the drawing in a single video. Otherwise, this image actually took influences from one of the time developments, that being a previous video. It comes from the Threads piece that I shared about 2 weeks ago now. I had this idea for the screens in the image, where each would have been a different view or different point of time, or something else that I was considering. And it never quite got past that phase before I changed route in that video. Well, this time and for this piece, I made them other videos and pieces that I have done that then tie into other channel videos and things I've worked on. The only image here that I didn't make a video on is the one over their arm, as that's actually just my laptop's screensaver, and I made it based on my story. And again, the main reason I didn't make it into a video, it had been that I hadn't really been active on the channel yet, or I hadn't wanted to mention my story on the channel yet with the characters I drew. So when I worked on it, I simply didn't film it. But I chose these pieces as they're my favourites for each tie. I had a few options for including my private stories, yet this is the one I prefer, and there were plenty of other images I've saved and stored that I could have used or chosen. The ones that I did end up with simply fit the piece and let me highlight the idea better, whilst nodding to a variety of things that I've done here already. So it made sense to feature the previous drawings on here, alongside the character made for the channel, as I do still love her design, and they work together to tie this piece into what it is. It doesn't mean that the drawing was simple. I spent far too long staring at the face, for example, trying to work out why it looked a little different and a little off, before reaching a point that it looked better and I felt that I could leave it. But the piece overall was a fun thing to look at, and something slightly new that let me explore different ways of incorporating the different elements of everything together, which then let me focus on the script, and this script was something that lets me ramble and waffle. It lets me go on about nothing, but it's fun for me to make. The other reason that I chose this character for this piece is because I made it for the channel, as I doubt I will be sharing my face on here anytime soon. I know that I realistically could, but I simply prefer not to at the end of the day, just for my own comfort and such. Besides, the character is far more fun for me to work with, once I consider each route, and it ties more into art this way, and I can better explore the themes that I want to with it. But with all of that being said, this is the end of this week's video. Thank you so much for watching and listening. It is a bit of an abrupt end, I will admit, but I hope you enjoyed it despite the differences it's had compared to normal. Either way, have a wonderful day, and goodbye.